Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. I caught Linda tipping clear liquid into my son's medicine. I'm Jake, 29, and that moment still hits like a punch. The syringe hovered over the sink, her wrist steady while mine shook. My kid wheezed in the next room and I froze. I moved before my brain caught up with my eyes. My hand closed around her elbow and she jerked back. The syringe slipped from her fingers and clattered into the sink. Clear drops spattered the counter, and I knew this was not an accident. "What is that?" My voice came out low and rough. She straightened her sweater and did not meet my eyes. "It's fine, I was just fixing the dose a little." Her calm tone scraped harder than any open argument. I reached past her and grabbed the medicine bottle. The plastic felt warm from her hand and wrong in mine. I held it to the light and watched the liquid slosh. It moved thinner than before, like someone had stretched it on purpose. In the hallway, my son coughed through the baby monitor. Each breath sounded wetter than the one before and faster. The doctor had warned us ear infections could turn ugly quickly. Now I was holding proof that his treatment had been tampered with. I twisted the cap and sniffed the bottle over the sink. Yesterday, the stuff blasted fake strawberry across the whole kitchen. Now there was barely anything, just the faintest sweet ghost. My heart hammered because the danger suddenly felt very real. "This is not what we brought home." I kept my eyes on it. Linda folded her arms, chin lifted like she was the calm one here. "You worry too much." I added some purified water to be safer. Her voice almost sounded proud, like she had solved a puzzle. "You diluted his antibiotic." The words tasted metallic on my tongue. Behind us, the monitor crackled with another short, sharp cry. I pictured the infection inside his tiny ear pushing harder. Every second this medicine failed him felt like a choice. Megan stepped into the doorway and looked between us slowly. Her hair was still damp from the shower and slightly tangled. "Why are you yelling?" Her eyes dropped to the bottle in my hand. She heard our son's thin whimper and flinched toward the monitor. "Your mom watered down his prescription." I set the bottle down hard. The plastic bounced once, that little hop making my stomach twist. Megan's gaze snapped to Linda with something like disbelief and hope. She wanted this to be a misunderstanding, not a betrayal. Linda took a breath and softened her expression for Megan. "Doctors always give too much. His system cannot handle those chemicals." She reached for the counter, fingers resting beside the syringe. "I just made it gentler. His body will thank me later." I felt my jaw lock as she talked about chemicals. The pediatrician's words ran through my head like a warning siren. "Finish the full course, do not skip, do not cut doses." Suddenly, that simple instruction felt like a line we had crossed. Megan picked up the syringe and rolled it between her fingers. "Did you throw any of it away?" Her voice trembled but stayed level. Linda's mouth twitched like she wanted to deny everything, then stopped. "I only adjusted it a bit. I know what I am doing." Our son cried again, longer this time with a ragged hitch. All three of us turned toward the hallway and no one moved. I realized I was the only one thinking in worst-case scenarios. That awareness burned, because worst case was exactly my job now. I grabbed a clean dosing spoon from the drawer and checked the clock. We were close to his next scheduled dose, maybe a few minutes early. I reached for the backup bottle we kept sealed in the diaper bag. I had insisted on a second one, and now I knew why. Linda stepped between me and the bag with a fast, stiff move. "You do not need more of that stuff in his body." Her hand landed on the zipper like she owned the decision. For a second I saw exactly how far this could go. "Move, please." I kept my voice flat so it would not crack. Her eyes narrowed like I had insulted her instead of protected him. Tom walked in from the living room and stopped at the threshold. He crossed his arms, and just that posture raised the stakes. "Everyone calm down." His voice carried that heavy, reasonable weight. He glanced at the bottle, then at our son on the monitor screen. "Your mother is only trying to help. You know she raised healthy kids." The way he stressed healthy made my chest tighten like a warning. I unzipped the bag anyway and pulled out the sealed bottle. My fingers fumbled with the childproof cap and slipped twice. Megan watched me, then looked back at Linda with wet eyes. I could see the moment she realized this was not a small thing. I want him to have what the doctor prescribed. She stepped closer to me. Her voice shook, yet the words came out stronger than before. Linda stared at her like she had chosen a side in a war. It hit me that this argument would not end with this dose. I measured out tea, medicine, and walked toward the nursery. Each step felt heavier, like I was carrying more than a spoon. Behind me, I heard a choked inhale that might have been Linda. I did not turn because if I hesitated, I might fold. My son lay flushed and glassy-eyed in the crib, breathing unevenly. He reached toward me with a tired little hand and whimpered. I lifted him and pressed the spoon to his lips slowly. He swallowed, then sagged against my chest like his body recognized help. As I rocked him, I listened to the muffled argument start outside. Words like poison and overreacting and control hit the hallway air. They crashed into each other, yet none of them touched my decision. I understood that protecting him might cost us more than I expected. When I carried him back out, Megan wiped her face with her sleeve. Tom stood stiff by the door, keys in his palm like a threat. Linda held her purse, jaw clenched, eyes shining with wounded certainty. They looked less like grandparents and more like people I had to manage. We will talk later. Tom opened the door with a sharp motion. Linda paused in the doorway and rested her hand on the frame. You are letting fear make you cruel. Her voice shook inside the quiet. I watched them leave and knew fear was the only reason my kid was still safe. My phone buzzed before sunrise and her name filled the screen. The message was long and jagged, all caps scattered through phrases. You scared us last night, we need to talk, you misread everything. My chest tightened again even though the house finally felt quiet. Another notification landed before I finished reading the first. I would never harm him, you humiliated me in front of my grandchild. She added a crying emoji like that would soften what she had done. Some part of me knew this was just the opening volley. Megan shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, still in sleep mode. I turned the screen toward her without saying a word. Her shoulders dropped as she read, lips moving over each sentence. She thinks you owe her an apology, she muttered, and that stung. You agree with her. It came out faster than I planned. Megan flinched and pressed her palms against the counter to steady herself. I agree we all lost it, but she is not a villain. Hearing that word made me realize I already had one in my head. She messed with his treatment. My voice came out low and flat. I know, she answered, and her eyes jumped toward the nursery door. He slept better with the real dose, I saw that too. She still sounded like someone trying to hold both sides at once. Linda called next, not even waiting for a reply to the texts. The ringtone drilled straight through the morning hush until Megan answered. Put me on speaker, came out sharp and clipped from the phone. Authority through a tiny speaker always feels bigger than it should. I am coming over, Linda announced, not asking for permission at all. We cannot leave things like this. Your husband overreacted terribly. I watched Megan's jaw clench at the word husband like it blamed her. He is standing right here, I said, leaning closer to the phone. A pause crackled across the line like she had not expected pushback. You both need to calm down, fear clouds judgment, she replied. There are studies about faith and healing that you refuse to read. There it was again, the hint that she knew better than professionals. Come if you want, I answered, cutting across her lecture. But we are laying ground rules today for him. I glanced at the nursery. The silence after that went longer, heavier, like she actually heard me. Fine, we will be there after breakfast, she finally breathed. Waiting for them felt worse than the fight itself in some ways. I made coffee I barely tasted and checked on my son repeatedly. Every time I looked at him, I replayed the moment with the syringe. It felt like watching a security tape inside my own head. Megan paced between the living room and the nursery door. I hate confrontations, she muttered, twisting her wedding band around. She loves control, you know how she gets when challenged. She was trying to warn me without picking a side, and I heard it. They cannot be alone with him anymore, I spoke it like a verdict. Megan stopped mid-step and stared at me like I had slapped her. That is my family, she answered, voice quiet but edged. Then they need to act like family, not freelance healers. The doorbell rang sooner than I wanted and cut that off. Tom walked in first, steady expression, keys hooked on one finger. Linda followed with a stiff smile and a folder tucked under her arm. That folder would haunt me later more than anything she said. No yelling, Tom announced as he stepped into the living room. We are all adults, let us talk like intelligent people today. He parked himself on the edge of the couch like a referee. The ironic part was he had already chosen a team before a re. Ving. Linda sat down but kept her purse zipped tight at her feet. I barely slept, she started, her voice trembling in a practiced way. To be accused of hurting my own grandchild after everything I know. She pressed a hand to her chest as if she were the victim here. Megan perched near the armrest, barely touching the cushion at all. You crossed a line, she said, eyes fixed on her mother's hands. You adjusted something you did not prescribe for a serious issue. Saying it out loud again seemed to jolt her into firmer ground. Linda opened the folder like she had rehearsed this moment all night. Printouts with charts and highlighted paragraphs slid onto the table. These are real clinical trials on placebo responses and natural methods. She tapped a graph with her finger as though that erased what happened. You are not a doctor, the words came out before I filtered them. Tom bristled and leaned forward, hands clasped like he was praying. Plenty of smart people do their own research these days, he countered. To trust blindly is foolish, especially when it involves a child. I am not following strangers online, Linda snapped, glaring at me hard. I have attended conferences, listened to experts who question mainstream ideas. She flipped to another page showing statistics about side effects. Every number became a weapon pointed at the medication we trusted. Megan picked up one sheet, scanning the highlighted lines in silence. How do you even know this is legitimate? She asked after a beat. Linda smiled small and tight, like she had been waiting for that. I know how to read studies, I check sources, I am not ignorant. I leaned closer, eyes on the fine print at the bottom of the page. The journal name sounded obscure, one I had never heard before. The author list included a wellness influencer I recognized from viral clips. That detail clicked into place like a red flag waving in my brain. You replaced his treatment with something you pulled from the internet. My voice rose despite my promise not to shout in front of him. Do you understand that you gambled with his hearing and maybe more? The silence after that question stretched, but no one rushed to answer. Linda's eyes filled, but the rest of her face stayed stubborn. I gave him harmless support while the drug still did its work. She focused on Megan now, not me, searching for sympathy. You saw him smile with me, he calms down in my arms. He trusts you, I said, and that hurt even as I spoke. That is why this is worse, he cannot protect himself around you. Tom's hand thumped once against his knee like a muted gavel. You are twisting this into abuse when it was care, he argued. Megan stood so fast the cushion sprang back behind her. Stop trying to make this about feelings, she cut in sharply. This is about whether our child gets exactly what the doctor orders. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she did not back down. Linda stared at her, shock flashing across her features like a glitch. So you are taking his side over your own mother, she whispered. Megan wiped at one eye, angry at herself for tearing up. I am taking my kid's side, that is the only side now. Tom exhaled hard and rubbed his face like this bored him. You two are young and scared, we have lived longer, seen more. He pointed toward the hallway where our son slept. One day you will regret drowning him in pharmaceuticals instead of faith. I stepped between him and the doorway without even thinking. Here is what I will regret, I answered, heart pounding fast. If I ever let someone with different beliefs override his medical plan. I knew then this conversation was not about one argument but every future one. Linda pulled her purse closer with a sharp tug of the strap. If you do not trust us, you will lose a support system, she warned. You will burn out as parents and resent each other and me. Her prediction landed like a curse, and it worked more than I admitted. No solo babysitting, I said, forcing each word to stay controlled. You can see him when we are around and only then. Megan's head turned toward me, surprise flickering, then something like relief. Linda recoiled like I had shoved her, and Tom went very still. You are punishing us, Linda whispered, voice shaking with outrage now. You are acting like we are strangers who wandered in off the street. She stood up, eyes glassy, but her mouth stayed hard. If we cannot be trusted, maybe we should stay away completely. Megan's hand trembled as she reached for the table edge. No one is pushing you away, she insisted, then faltered mid-sentence. We just need to know our boundaries will be respected every time. The last two words hung there because everyone knew that was the test. Tom rose slowly and picked up the folder, tucking it under one arm. You are making a mistake, he told us, not raising his voice at all. Fear-based parenting creates sick children and broken families. The confidence in that line shook me more than if he had shouted. At the doorway, Linda paused and looked back toward the nursery. I prayed for that baby before he existed, she murmured, knuckles white. I will keep praying, but you cannot stop me from believing what I know. In that moment, I realized belief was the one thing I could never baby-proof. The latch clicked behind them, and the house went strangely quiet again. Megan and I stood there, not touching, breathing too fast for no movement. We just blew up our childcare plan, she muttered with a humorless laugh. Neither of us knew yet that this was only the first explosion. The wail yanked me out of sleep before I knew my name. I stumbled to the crib, pressed my palm to his forehead, felt heat that burned my hand off him. My heart spiked harder than his cry, and I grabbed the thermometer with clumsy fingers. The reading climbed fast, past the safe range, past the number the nurse had once called concerning. Megan rushed in, hair tangled, eyes already wide. What's wrong with him? Her voice cracked halfway through the question. I turned the screen toward her, watched the color drain from her face. That's not low grade anymore, she whispered, and the word anymore told me she was comparing. I'm calling someone, she reached for her phone without a plan. Doctor on call first, I said, trying to sound like I knew anything. What if they tell us to just watch and wait again? Her thumb hovered over the screen. If we wait and he slips, we never forgive ourselves, I answered and meant it. She tapped through to the after-hours line, pacing in tight circles. I held our son against my chest, feeling each hot, shuddering breath. My shirt dampened fast where his cheek pressed in hard. Every tiny jerk of his body felt like it measured my failure. The nurse picked up with a steady, practiced tone that somehow made it worse. Megan explained the temperature, the infection, the last dose time, all in one tumbling rush. I watched her shoulders, saw the moment the nurse changed her tone. Okay, you need urgent evaluation. Now, Megan repeated, and those words punched the room. We're going in, I said, already moving toward the door with our son. ER or urgent care? Megan blocked the hallway for a second. Whichever gets us in front of someone faster, I answered, not slowing down. I grabbed his bag, checked the medication out of habit, then slipped it inside on purpose. On the drive, his crying softened to weak little whimpers. I kept glancing in the mirror, counting breaths between each sound. Megan had her phone out again, thumb hovering over Linda's contact. Don't, I muttered, eyes still on the road, and that one word hit us both. She'd want to know, Megan argued, pressing the phone against her leg. She wants control, I shot back, then forced my tone down. We can tell her after he's seen, after we know what's going on. She stared at the screen, then locked it, and that tiny click felt huge. Inside the hospital, they took one look at him and waved us past registration. A nurse clipped something to his foot, wrapped a cuff around his small arm. Numbers popped up that made her eyebrows jump before she smoothed her face. How many doses has he had exactly? She asked, eyes on the monitor. All of them since the prescription started, I answered, then hesitated. Her gaze flicked up at the pause, sharp and direct. What does that mean, since it started, but what? She waited, not filling the silence. Megan's fingers dug into my arm, asking me not to blow up our lives. Someone altered one bottle, I forced out, voice almost a whisper. Family thought they were helping, we caught it and opened a fresh one. Megan stared at the floor, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. The nurse's face changed in a way I didn't like at all. Altered how? She asked, eyes narrowed now, tone clipped. Thin down, less active, not what we picked up, I answered, keeping it simple. She typed something fast, then glanced at our son breathing in jagged bursts. Okay, the physician needs to hear that directly, she said, and that word directly stung. They moved us into a small room and told us someone would be in soon. I bounced him gently, counting seconds between each shallow inhale. Megan pressed her knuckles to her lips, staring at the opposite wall like it might crack. We should have told the pediatrician right away, she muttered, and I tasted guilt. The door opened and a doctor stepped in with a tablet and tired eyes. She listened to his chest, checked his ear, watched his breathing, all business. He's working harder than I like, she said, then looked at the chart. I see a note here about possible tampering, walk me through that. My throat felt dry, but the story came out anyway. Not every detail, not every fight, just the part that mattered medically. So, Young close to us had altered the dosage after we left the pharmacy. Her expression stayed neutral, but her hands stopped moving for a second. So he may have missed effective doses during the start of treatment, she summed up. That window is important, she added, looking not at us but at him. We're going to give him something through an IV and monitor closely. Her focus on the word window stuck in my head like a splinter. While they set up the line, Megan turned away, shoulders shaking. I stepped beside her, still holding our son with one arm. This isn't your fault, I whispered, even though part of me disagreed. She laughed once, harsh and short, like that sentence insulted her. You warned me, she hissed, keeping her voice low for the nurse. I kept trying to make it less serious in my head. Her hands twisted together while our kid flinched at the needle. That's on me, I picked comfort over reality, she finished, and it hurt because it was honest. The doctor came back after the fluids started dripping. She pulled a rolling stool close and lowered her voice. I'm going to be blunt, she began, and my stomach dropped at that. If anyone interferes again with his care, I am obligated to report it. The word report hung between us, heavy and sharp. Are you talking about calling social services on his grandparents? I asked. She held my gaze, not flinching, not softening it. I'm talking about protecting a child from unsafe medical decisions, she answered. Megan's face crumpled and smoothed in 1 second like a glitch. They adore him, she managed, clinging to that one piece. I don't doubt that, the doctor replied, hands folded loosely now. Love doesn't cancel harm, it just makes people justify it harder. Do we need to start that process now? I asked, voice lower. Not if this stops here, she said, choosing each word carefully. But you two need a plan, no unsupervised care with anyone who alters orders. The phrase with anyone broadened the whole problem beyond Linda. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Document everything, dates, times, what was said, who touched his medication. If this becomes a pattern, records matter more than feelings, she added. Then she left, and the room felt smaller around all that advice. Megan sank into the plastic chair like her legs gave out. Are we really talking about building a case against my own mother? She whispered. I watched our son's chest rise and fall with slightly more ease. If it keeps him safe, then yes, I answered, and meant it more than I liked. Her eyes filled again, but this time there was something steely under it. I don't want to wait for a pattern before we act, she said. She already showed us what she's willing to do when no one's looking. That last phrase settled into me like both accusation and agreement. Hours later, they cleared us to go home with strict instructions. Extra monitoring, follow-up appointment, call back if anything changed fast. The doctor repeated her warning about interference, softer but still firm. Each reminder sounded less like guidance and more like a countdown. On the way out, Megan stopped near the sliding doors. We need proof if this ever happens again, she murmured, staring straight ahead. Not just our word against hers when emotions are high. I knew where her mind had jumped before she even spoke the next part. We have cameras, I said, remembering the baby monitor saved clips. Not everywhere, she replied, eyes finally meeting mine. We should cover the kitchen, living room, hallway, anywhere she handles him. For the first time, she was the one pushing for more, not less. We're turning our house into surveillance, I pointed out, half joking. We're turning it into evidence if we ever need it, she shot back. That settled it, heavier than any joke I could make. I nodded, and with that small gesture, we crossed another invisible threshold. Back home, I set our son down gently, watching his more even breaths. Megan hovered nearby, not taking her eyes off him for a second. She tossed me her phone with Linda's contact still near the top. "You tell her about tonight," she said, "and about the warning." My thumb hovered over the call button while my pulse pounded. "How honest am I being?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Completely," Megan replied, voice rough but steady now. "If this blows up, I want it blowing up on truth, not half versions." I didn't dial yet. I stood there listening to the soft beep of the monitor and the faint hiss of the humidifier. The doctor's words replayed in my skull like a loop I couldn't shut off. Next time someone touched his medicine, it wouldn't just be a family argument anymore. The call connected before the first full ring finished. "You better not be overreacting again," her voice hit me before hello. For a second I almost hung up, thumb hovering over the screen. Instead I put it on speaker and felt the room tighten around us. "We spend the night at the hospital," I kept my tone clipped. Megan stood beside me, arms folded hard across her chest. "He needed stronger antibiotics," through a line. They monitored his breathing. I watched Megan flinch, like hearing it out loud made it fresh again. "That's ridiculous," Linda drew in a sharp breath over the line. "Kids spike temperatures, doctors love to push aggressive treatments." She kept going, already building her defense before I finished. I let her talk for 3 seconds, then cut across. "The doctor documented why he got worse." My thumb dug into the case. Megan stared at the table, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. "They wrote that his medicine appeared altered at home." That word "altered" did exactly what I expected on the other end. "I cannot believe this." Something scraped in the background, maybe a chair. "So now strangers are accusing family of interference because you panic." Her outrage crackled through the tiny speaker like static. Every syllable carried more indignation than concern for him. "This isn't about my nerves." I forced each word slow and clear. "The physician warned us, if anyone tampers again, they have to report." Megan's eyes met mine when I said report, and we both heard it. On the phone, silence stretched long enough to feel like an answer. "They used that word." Linda's voice dropped, suddenly careful. "Tampers, like we're criminals sneaking poison into his food." I heard Tom's deeper tone in the background, muffled but sharp. She must have moved the phone away while they conferred off mic. I pictured them in their kitchen, familiar habits already engaged. He'd be pacing slowly while she clutched the phone like a lifeline. They defeat each other lines about overreach and corrupt systems. That script had always comforted them more than any actual specialist. "Put it on speaker for both of you." I didn't phrase it as a request. There was rustling, then Tom's flat voice cut in. "You're letting fear-based staff bully you," he stated, not asking anything. "They see cautious grandparents and decide to make an example." "They see a sick child whose prescription didn't work," I countered. "They see that someone changed it at home without training." My throat burned, but the words came out steady enough. "They told us to document everything from now on, so we are." Megan's hand found the edge of the table, fingers pressing hard. "You came close to losing access last night," I added, not softening it. "If they had called services, we wouldn't control what happened next." The thought alone made my stomach twist even while I spoke. "That would destroy this family." Linda's voice went shrill around the edges. "They'd stamp us as abusers over a misunderstanding. Is that what you want?" I pictured her hand flying to her chest in outrage, the move she loved. Guilt used to land when she did that. It didn't land the same anymore. "I want one thing." I looked at Megan, making sure she heard too. "No one touches his medicine again except us and licensed staff." The sentence hung there like a wire stretched between both households. I knew whoever crossed it next would tell us who they really were. "You think we're unsafe?" Tom's voice came out lower, slower now. He wasn't outraged anymore, he sounded insulted, which was worse. "You think we would deliberately endanger our own grandchild?" He emphasized deliberately, like intention mattered more than impact. "I think you believe your methods more than his specialist." My palms felt damp around the phone, but I didn't back off. And belief is exactly what got us into emergency care. Megan's breath caught at belief because she knew that was the core. We are coming over, Linda's decision snapped into the space. You will not label us threats without looking us in the eye. There it was, challenge not collaboration. Megan closed her eyes for a moment like she'd expected nothing else. Fine, I ended the standoff before it dragged further. You can come, but understand something before you walk in. I glanced toward the baby monitor, watching our son stir lightly. We're going to review footage together, all of it. What footage? Tom's tone sharpened immediately. I caught the first sliver of real worry from him all week. The cameras, I didn't elaborate, didn't fill the silence. You'll see when you get here, I finished and tapped end. Megan dropped into a chair as soon as the call cut. That's going to explode, she muttered, rubbing her temples. They're going to lose their minds over being recorded. The funny part was they weren't nearly upset enough about the actual risk. I opened the monitoring app, pulse thudding harder than before. We added more angles after that night in the emergency department. I hadn't reviewed past days properly yet, just skimmed timestamps. Now I force myself to scroll back one clip at a time. The first video loaded from the kitchen angle, timestamp from earlier that week. Our son sat propped in a seat while Linda moved around confidently. She wasn't sneaking, she moved like someone used to doing this. I watched her take out a small dropper bottle from her bag. She glanced toward the hallway, then unscrewed the cap with practiced ease. She measured something into a spoon, checked the doorway again, then leaned in. Our boy opened his mouth to fuss, and she slipped the dose inside. After, she wiped his lips and murmured something I couldn't quite hear. My stomach lurched in a way that had nothing to do with motion. That's not a one-time decision, I said, voice flat. That's a pattern, she's done that enough to get comfortable. Megan leaned closer, one hand covering her mouth as the clip ended. Play the next one, her voice sounded raw but focused now. So I did, different day, same kitchen, same bag near her feet. This time Tom was in frame, leaning on the counter watching. He didn't move to stop her, he nodded once after their little ritual. Pause it, Megan's eyes locked on his expression when Linda squeezed the dropper. He knows exactly what she's giving him, she said, words clipped. There's no way he thought that was part of the prescription. Seeing his calm approval shook her more than the secret bottle. I tapped through more clips, each one stacking on the last. Once in the living room, she touched something to his gums while humming. Another in the hallway, quick and efficient, like she'd rehearsed the routine. Each time, she checked for us only after the dose was already given. This started before the ear infection, didn't it? Megan's voice dropped. She wasn't asking me, she was talking to herself, hearing the answer. I scrubbed back further and found dates from when he just had sniffles. There was Linda again, doing the same thing with the same easy confidence. I thought she was just cuddling him, Megan whispered, eyes shiny. All those times I walked in on them and she looked so proud. Her face twisted, grief and anger fighting for first place. I feel like an idiot for calling that bonding, she added, and I couldn't argue. My thumb hovered over a clip with a familiar timestamp. The night of the first big fight, the diluted dose, the confrontation. Want to see what it looked like from the other side? I asked it quietly because I wasn't sure I wanted to. Play it, Megan's jaw tightened until the muscle jumped. So I hit open, there was Linda at the sink, back to the camera. Our son fussed faintly through the monitor in another room, sound picked up. We watched her draw up the medicine, then pour a visible portion down the drain. She filled the rest with clear water, hands steady, no hesitation. She tapped the syringe twice, like someone used to handling equipment. Then she turned, carried it toward the hallway, and only then did I enter frame. We watched my own arm grab her elbow, watched the struggle from outside ourselves. Seeing it from that angle did something strange to my memory. All the doubt I'd secretly carried about overreacting shrank in 4 seconds. I hadn't misread a look or misheard an explanation. I'd interrupted something intentional, not an awkward mistake. Megan pressed her fingertips against the laptop casing like she needed grounding. I hate this, she breathed, eyes locked on her mother's face on screen. I hate that I need video proof to believe what I already watched. She blinked hard, but the tears came anyway and clung to her lashes. I saved key clips into a separate folder and labeled it quietly. Not something dramatic, just a date and one blunt word. I thought about the doctor's advice to keep records, not just memories. Suddenly, that folder felt heavier than everything else in the room. The doorbell echoed through the house just as I finished renaming the files. Megan wiped her face with the back of her hand and straightened. Don't let them hold him yet, her tone left no room for debate. We talk first, then we decide what happens next. I opened the door and stepped aside only enough for them to enter. Tom walked past with his shoulders squared, eyes scanning for our son. Linda followed more cautiously, clutching her purse like a shield. None of them reached for me, none of them asked how we were holding up. Where is my grandbaby? Linda's gaze swept the room, hungry. Sleeping, I answered, moving subtly to block the hallway. He stays out of this conversation for now. Her lips pressed together so tightly the color drained from them. We drove over here as soon as we could, Tom's hands anchored on his hips. Now you tell us what that doctor claimed and what you told them. He angled his body toward me, trying to box me in verbally. The old me would have tried to soften things, that version was done. I told her someone at home diluted his medication without authorization. My voice came out even, which surprised me. She documented that detail in his record under potential interference. Megan's gaze stayed on her mother, watching every twitch. And you just volunteered that it was us, Linda's eyes flashed hot. You handed them our names like we're dangerous strangers. Her outrage rolled forward, trying to pull Megan with it. I watched my wife take a small step away instead. I didn't use names, I kept my focus on the facts. She asked who had access, I repeated exactly who lives here. I let that sink in, everyone knew what that list looked like. If services look at logs later, they'll see your visits. You don't understand how that system works, Tom snapped, face darkening. They twist innocent acts into neglect because they need statistics. He stabbed a finger toward the laptop on the table. Now you're recording family on top of tattling to bureaucrats. We're documenting, not spying, Megan's voice cut through the room. If nothing happened, you've got nothing to worry about. She walked around to the opposite side of the table and tapped a key. The first kitchen clip froze on the screen, waiting. Linda's eyes dropped to the image. Her entire posture shifted, just a fraction but enough to see it. That angle, she whispered, recognizing the view immediately. You put surveillance equipment in here like we're criminals. You dosed him without telling us, my finger hovered next to the spacebar. Watch first, decide what we are after that. I hit play before they could argue about the setup. The footage rolled, their secret routine projected bigger than either of them. Tom's shoulders stiffened when his on-screen double nodded. I watched the real version watch himself and say nothing. Linda grabbed the back of a chair as she saw herself lift the dropper. No one spoke during the 15 seconds it took for the liquid to vanish. That is harmless support, her voice shook but the words stayed firm. It doesn't replace anything, it just enhances his own resilience. She gestured impatiently toward the paused image. You can't tell what's in that bottle from a grainy video. I clicked open the next clip without engaging the argument yet. Living room this time, our boy lying in her lap fussing. She appeared to calm him while her hand moved near his mouth. Another quick squeeze, another hidden dose, another satisfied little nod. Megan's eyes didn't leave the screen for a second. How many times? She asked quietly, not looking at anyone. The question hung there, pointed at the past but aimed at the present. Linda stared at the floor now, expression locked tight. All those moments you called him so settled with you, Megan continued. You were giving him something when our backs were turned. Her hands shook but her voice got sharper with each sentence. You turned my baby into a project without asking, she finished, and that landed. Linda's head snapped up at that choice of word. I turned him into a priority when you ran to pills for every sniffle. She jabbed a finger toward the hallway this time. I stepped in with wisdom when you collapsed under fear. Stop making this a morality play, I shoved the laptop a little closer. This isn't about courage versus cowardice. This is about risk management. I opened the clip from the night of the dilution, the biggest piece. The moment she saw her own hands at the sink, she went rigid. No, she whispered, barely audible. On the video, she tilted the syringe and emptied a measurable portion. The clear stream hit the drain, then she topped it off with water. She didn't look worried, she looked satisfied. That detail made me nauseous. If that as harmless support, explain what you're doing here, I asked. My voice had gone quiet and dangerous even to my own ears. You're not adding anything, you're weakening the actual dose. The footage froze on her expression, caught mid-movement. Linda's hands flew to her face, then dropped just as fast. I adjusted it, she insisted, clinging to that word like a rope. They overload children, I brought it down to a safer range. Every syllable exposed just how deep her conviction ran. Tom finally stepped closer to the screen, nostrils flaring. You record us without our knowledge, then play judge and jury. He turned on Megan then, eyes sharp. You're okay with your partner violating your parents' privacy like this? I'm not okay with anyone altering my child's treatment plan, she fired back. Pick whichever violation frightens you more, that tells me who you are. Her answer wiped the rhetorical smugness off his face in one line. For a second I saw doubt flicker in his expression, then vanish. This is why our country is sick, Tom's voice rose by a notch. Everyone worships pharmaceutical companies and demonizes traditional approaches. He spread his hands as if presenting a courtroom argument. Your cameras prove not. Hing except that we care enough to intervene. They prove frequency, I tapped the screen highlighting timelines. Different days, different outfits, same pattern, same secret doses. I slid the tablet with the hospital note across the table next. The physician's record mentions questionable handling of medication at home. Linda read the line, lips moving soundlessly over the phrase. Her fingers tightened on the paper until it crumpled under her grip. So you'll hand this over if we don't obey your rules, she accused. She wasn't wrong and we both knew it. We'll hand it over if anything like this happens again, I clarified. That's not blackmail, that's protecting a vulnerable person. The word vulnerable tasted heavier than any label we'd used before. Our son breathed softly through the monitor, oblivious to the war downstairs. So that's it, Linda's shoulders slumped, then straightened with fresh defiance. We follow your orders or you slice us out of his life. Her eyes shone with wetness but her jaw stayed solid. You think you can actually enforce that, she challenged. Yes, Megan stepped closer to me, not away. We decide who sees him, when, and under what conditions. She raised a hand, ticking points off on her fingers. No unsupervised visits, no mystery bottles, no adjustments ever again. Tom let out a harsh laugh that held no humor. You really think we'd touch anything after being treated this way? He gestured toward the screens, the paperwork, the stiff air. You've turned parenthood into a police operation. If this feels like law enforcement to you, maybe examine why, I replied. People who have nothing to hide don't fear documentation this much. I lowered my voice, made sure each word landed. Take the warning seriously or don't, your choice decides what happens next. Linda looked at Megan, not me, pleading now. You will let him know we would never injure that child, she begged. Her voice trembled for real this time, not as a tactic. Megan's face crumpled briefly, then hardened again with effort. I will tell him when he's older that we protected him, she answered. Even when that protection meant hurting people we love. She swallowed like those words scraped on their way out. And that we kept receipts when anyone tried to override his care. A ringing silence settled across the room, thick and vibrating. I could hear the faint hum from the monitor upstairs. Somewhere down the street a car door slammed, distant and irrelevant. All that mattered lived inside four walls and one hard decision. Tom reached for the printed note, folded it slowly, slid it into his pocket. That goes with us, he declared, meeting my eyes like a dare. Any case they try to build, we'll have our side documented too. He always believed in competing narratives more than uncomfortable facts. You're not taking the videos, I added, voice sharper. Those stay with us, backed up, labeled. I caught Linda's flinch. It backed up and didn't apologize. She finally understood this wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. You're turning us into people you can use as leverage, she whispered. No, I shook my head once slowly. You did that when you chose secret treatments over transparency. I just dragged what you did into daylight, big difference. She moved toward the hallway, instinctively aiming for the nursery. Megan stepped sideways, blocking the path with one smooth shift. You can see him next week, she said, voice steady. If you can accept the rules in writing before that. In writing, Tom's eyebrows shot up, outrage back at full strength. You expect us to sign some contract to hug our grandson. Megan held his gaze without wavering. If you want access, you sign that you won't play doctor, she replied. Linda's eyes bounced between us, desperate for a softer option. None appeared. For once we presented one unified wall. She let out a long, shaky breath that almost turned into a sob. We need time to think, she murmured, directing the words at the floor. You have time, I answered. What you don't have is another chance to experiment on him. That last phrase slipped out before I could soften it. I didn't correct it, because softening had nearly cost us already. Tom opened the door with more force than necessary. Linda hesitated on the threshold, glancing back toward the unseen crib. I still believe what I did helped him, she said quietly. That doesn't change just because you recorded it. I met her eyes, tired down to the bone. I believe what you did almost made everything worse, I replied. And that belief is backed by labs and notes, not threads in conferences. We both knew which kind would matter if this escalated. The door shut behind them with a dull, final thud. Megan sagged into the nearest chair, covering her face with both hands. That felt like a trial, she whispered through her fingers. The messed up part is I'm not sure which side just lost more. I walked back to the laptop and started copying files to an external drive. Each progress bar inched forward like a quiet promise for the future. I named the backup folder something boring that only I would recognize. It still felt like labeling a fire extinguisher I prayed we'd never need. Upstairs, our son let out a sleepy sound through the monitor. We both froze, listening, until it faded into steady breathing again. Megan wiped her eyes and stood, shoulders squared despite the exhaustion. We just chose him over peace, she murmured half to herself. I watched the backup finish and unplugged the drive with a click. Peace built on denial was never going to last, I answered. I tucked the drive into a safe place, heart pounding for no obvious reason. Some part of me already knew this wouldn't be the last time we opened that folder. The woman at my door lifted a badge and said Child Services. My hand stayed on the knob because my legs went useless. Behind me, our kid laughed at some cartoon, totally unaware. I need to talk with both parents, she added, and that word need cut. Megan appeared in the hallway, face drained before she even saw the badge. What is this about? She asked, voice rough like she already knew. The worker glanced past us toward the living room where our son babbled. We received a report about unsafe medical decisions in this home, she said. The floor seemed to tilt, but my voice came out steady. Come in, I answered, stepping aside before Megan could argue. If we refused, that would look worse than anything already written. Megan brushed my arm as she passed, a quick panic little touch. The worker sat, opened a thin folder, and pulled out a form. I'm going to ask some questions, then I'll want to see your child. Her tone stayed calm, almost kind, which somehow scared me more. First, tell me about recent illnesses and treatment choices, she started. Megan looked at me, silently begging me to lead this part. Our son was treated for an ear infection, I began, keeping it short. He worsened, needed hospital care, and they changed his medication route. I stopped before mentioning anything else, waiting to see her reaction. She wrote a few notes, then looked up with sharp interest. The referral mentions overuse of pharmaceuticals and ignoring safer options. Her eyes moved between us, checking faces for guilt or confusion. Who in your circle might describe your parenting that way? She asked. Megan let out a short, bitter laugh and wiped one eye. Do you want the honest answer or the polite version? She asked. Honest is best, the worker replied, folding her hands. My parents hold very strong views about conventional care, Megan said. I watched the social worker's pen pause on the page. So this concern came from extended family, not professionals, she clarified. Megan nodded once, throat tight, fingers twisting her ring. They think faith and herbs can replace prescriptions, she murmured, stopping there. The worker studied us for another slow beat before continuing. The report also states that you give heavy dosages for minor issues. She turned the form slightly, like she wanted us to see the phrasing. Have you ever gone beyond what a clinician ordered? She asked. No, I answered, probably too fast. We follow instructions exactly, and we keep all paperwork. I pulled the hospital discharge papers from the drawer where I had stashed them. I had never been so grateful for my habit of hoarding documents. She skimmed the print, lips moving over lines about our visit. Her eyebrows twitched at the note about medication not working as expected. Here it says staff suspected the dosage had been weakened at home, she read. That's unusual, tell me more about that entry, she added, looking up. Megan inhaled sharply, then forced herself to speak. My mother changed his treatment without informing us, she said. She believed she was making it kinder, but it made him worse. Her voice shook on mother, and the worker noticed, eyes softening a fraction. Did you confront her? The worker asked, tone still neutral. Yes, I answered, resting my palms flat on the table. We now have strict limits, no unsupervised time, no access to medicine. I hesitated, then pushed forward before fear stopped me. We also installed cameras, I added, watching her face. They captured her diluting one bottle and giving other things secretly. I pulled my laptop closer and opened the folder I never wanted to need. If you're going to judge us, you should see the whole situation, I said. Megan wiped her palms on her jeans and nodded toward the screen. Play the kitchen one, she whispered, voice barely there. The worker leaned forward slightly, pen paused, attention locked. I opened the clip with Linda at the sink and hit play. The recording showed every move, no room left for CR. Eat of memory. Linda measuring, pouring, topping off with water, then walking away. The worker watched without comment, eyes narrowing only once. That's the grandparent, she asked quietly, and we both nodded. I played the earlier clips, the ones with drops and quick gestures. Each short sequence stacked on the last, building a clear pattern. Our son's small face, her hand, that hidden bottle, Tom's approving nod. By the third one, the worker exhaled slowly through her nose. To be clear, she said, tapping her pen against the folder. None of this was discussed with you beforehand. Correct, Megan answered, voice steadier now that something external existed. We found out the hard way, when he almost ended up much sicker. The worker made more notes, then closed the folder with a soft thump. I also need to see the child and check for any immediate concerns, she said. Every muscle in my body tensed at the idea of her judging him. Still, I nodded and led the way toward the hallway. Our son sat on the floor in his room chewing a toy. He looked up, saw the stranger, then looked right back at Megan. He crawled toward her and grabbed her leg, using her as a post. That simple move told more truth than any speech I could give. The worker crouched down, keeping a safe distance. Hey there, can you show me how you stand? She coaxed. He pulled himself up, holding the furniture, then plopped back onto his diapered butt. She smiled, checked him over with a quick practice scan, then stood. Healthy weight, no visible marks, responsive to both of you, she said. The tension in my shoulders eased a notch, not much, just slightly. I don't see signs of physical mistreatment, she added, eyes still tracking him. But I do see a serious disagreement about how to handle health. Back in the living room, she resumed her seat and reopened the folder. So here's where we are, she began, meeting each of our eyes. Your relatives reported you for relying on drugs instead of natural approaches. They framed that as endangering a child for convenience, she continued. Megan dragged both hands through her hair, then held them tight together. And what do you think? She asked, bracing for the verdict. The worker glanced toward the stack of papers and the paused footage. I think you followed licensed guidance, then caught unauthorized meddling, she replied. She let that sit for a moment, letting us breathe. Which means I am more concerned about those extended relatives than you, she finished. My knees almost buckled from relief and rage hitting at the same time. Somewhere between those two, something in me hardened permanently. So what happens now? I asked, voice coming out hoarse. I will close this with a note that you appear protective and appropriate, she answered. However, I will also flag the interference from family in his record. If they call again, context will already be on file, she added. Megan stared at her hands, then cleared her throat. Can we ask something? She murmured without looking up. The worker nodded, waiting. What would you do if you were us? Megan asked. The worker leaned back, thinking for a beat. I can't give legal advice, but I can speak from experience, she said. When adults put ideology over medical instructions, they rarely stop by words alone. Distance, supervision, and written boundaries are not overreactions in those cases. So we're not paranoid, I pushed, needing to hear it from someone neutral. You're not, she answered, absolutely certain. You saw behavior that compromised treatment, then you changed access. That's exactly what guardians are supposed to do, she added, pen tapping once. She closed her folder and stood, giving us one last look. I will note that you cooperated, that your child seems well cared for, she said. If anything escalates or they threaten you over this visit, document that too. Then she left and the door clicked shut on the first official test we'd passed. We both stayed frozen until her car pulled away from the curb. Then Megan turned on me, eyes wide, breathing fast. They called the hotline on us, she hissed, voice full of horror. They tried to flip the story before we ever could. They weaponized the system they accused us of trusting, I answered. Hearing it out loud made my stomach twist again. Megan paced, hands flying, words tumbling. They could have gotten him removed, even just temporarily, she said. I backed everything up for this exact moment, I reminded her. If we hadn't, this would be our word against theirs right now. She stopped and looked at the laptop like it was a lifeboat. I used to hate when you archived everything, she muttered, half-shaken laugh. Her phone buzzed on the table, a new message from Linda. I heard someone from the state dropped by, the text read. How did it feel to be inspected for once? The follow-up said. Megan's hand actually trembled as she handed me the screen. She knew the time, I noted, throat tightening again. Of course she did, Megan answered, bitter now instead of broken. She probably expected them to walk in and see a chaotic house. Instead, they saw a kid playing and two exhausted parents holding it together. Another text came through, longer this time. This is what happens when you put your trust in that system, it started. They control your family while Big Pharma gets rich off your fear, it continued. She's not even hiding the angle anymore, I said, reading it out loud. Megan grabbed her own phone back and started typing with furious thumbs. Do not ever call that number about us again, she wrote. We showed them everything, including the videos and hospital notes, she added. Her thumb hovered over send, then she hit it before doubt could creep in. It didn't take long for Linda to respond. You betrayed your blood to outsiders, the message flashed. You gave them ammunition to come after us if anything goes wrong, she insisted. She always twisted responsibility into persecution within 3 lines or less. I opened a new email on my laptop while Megan argued over text. Subject line simple, boundaries moving forward. I started listing conditions in short, precise sentences, each one non-negotiable. No unsupervised contact, no handling prescriptions, no visits without prior agreement. Are you actually writing this like a contract? Megan asked, leaning over. She thinks spoken lines are flexible, I answered, fingers moving. We need something printable, something we can point to later. I added one more line about not calling outside agencies against our household. Megan stared at that last sentence for a moment. Send that one separately, she murmured. Make sure there's a trail where we ask directly. Her voice held a new edge, the kind that comes after betrayal. So I copied the message, simplified it, then sent it to both Linda and Tom. Any future hotline reports regarding us will be treated as harassment, I wrote. We will involve counsel if necessary to protect our child and ourselves, I finished. Seeing the words protect ourselves next to protect our child felt strange and necessary. Minutes later, my phone rang with Tom's name blazing across the screen. I let it ring twice, then hit accept and held it away on speaker. "What have you done?" His voice exploded immediately. "You dragged government into a family disagreement," he accused. "They were already here," I answered, keeping my tone icy. "You dragged them in when you painted us as reckless." I heard Megan suck in a sharp breath, but she stayed quiet. "Luckily for us, evidence exists outside your opinion," I continued. Tom scoffed, the sound short and contemptuous. "Those workers are trained to find abuse even when none exists," he argued. "They brainwashed you into thinking we're the threat now." He had no idea that the worker had been more worried about them. "They saw our son thriving and your interference on video," I said. "They closed the file on us," I emphasized. Silence surged down the line for a moment, thick and heavy. "You showed them private footage without our consent," he finally snarled. "I showed them what you already did in our kitchen," I replied. "The camera didn't twist your arm or move your hands." I could almost hear him clenching his jaw through the connection. "If you keep pushing, this stops being a family issue," I warned. "This call is over," he snapped, then hung up without goodbye. The abrupt cut somehow hurt more than a long rant would have. Megan dropped into a chair and stared at nothing for a full minute. "I don't recognize them anymore," she whispered, voice small and stunned. "You're seeing who they are without filters," I answered softly. "Maybe they were always like this, and we just stayed blind longer." That thought hurt us both in different ways. Some illusions die slow, even after direct hits. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a shorter message. "We need a break from your hostility," Linda had written. "We'll step back until you remember we're on your side," it said. The phrase, "your hostility," landed like a stone in Megan's lap. She stared at it, then locked the screen with a sharp tap. "They ask for distance," she said slowly. "Let's give it to them," I replied, surprising myself with how calm that sounded. I didn't realize then how long that distance would stretch. In the weeks after the visit, small shifts started to show up. I kept paperwork in a neat stack, ready in case strangers asked again. I backed up video clips to more than one place in case something failed. Hypervigilance became a habit, not a temporary state. Megan stopped hovering over every cough, but she watched the calendar. Every checkup lived in her phone as a reminder with notes attached. She asked the pediatrician extra questions, ones she would have swallowed before. She never mentioned her parents by name in those rooms, but I saw the restraint. We heard about Linda and Tom through cousins and mutual acquaintances. Little comments about farmer-obsessed kids and lost grandchildren floated back. Rumors painted us as unstable, easily influenced, blindly trusting institutions. It stung, but not enough to make us crawl back. One afternoon, a cousin forwarded a group message Linda had blasted out. A long paragraph about medical abuse and children pumped full of toxins. At the bottom, our situation appeared in vague terms, just detailed enough to recognize. Megan read it twice, then sat very still, breathing like she'd run. "She's building her own case," Megan muttered, lifting her head. "She wants sympathy before the truth spreads beyond what she can spin." Her hands tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. "I'm done letting her tell the only version," she decided. "What are you thinking?" I asked, already half guessing. "I'm replying right there," she answered, jaw set. "Not with a rant, just with facts she can't twist easily." I nodded, nervous but trusting the new steel in her spine. She typed slowly, choosing each sentence like a blade. "We followed specialists when our child got seriously ill," she wrote. "A family member watered down his treatment and gave unapproved substances," she continued. "Child Services cleared us and advised stricter boundaries," she finished. She added nothing else, no names, no drama, no insults. Then hit send into the same group Linda had chosen as her stage. The chat went silent for a while, a digital held breath. Then unfamiliar numbers started replying with cautious messages of support. "I didn't expect that," Megan whispered, watching little bubbles pop up. One cousin asked if she needed help with childcare. Another wrote, "I'm so sorry you went through that," and left it there. No one rushed to defend Linda in that thread, not once. Later that night, an email landed in my inbox from Tom's address. Subject line: formal notice. He laid out their hurt, accused us of smearing them in public circles, then warned that any further defamation would push them toward legal action. I read it twice, then opened the folder with our saved proof again. Every clip, every note, every timestamp reminded me why we started this. If they want lawyers, lawyers will see this, I told Megan. Saying it aloud made whatever fear remained feel smaller. We forwarded the email to a family attorney someone at work had recommended. Explained the hospital stay, the dilution, the call to services, the visit. Offered to provide the videos if needed, just not through email. Within a day, we had a short reply that changed our posture completely. The attorney recommended a simple response, nothing flashy. State the boundaries again, confirm that our comments had been factual. Mention the involvement of child services and medical staff as corroboration. Avoid insults but make it clear we were not intimidated. So I drafted one more message to Linda and Tom that week. Your latest email has been reviewed by counsel, I opened. Our prior statements have been accurate accounts of documented events, I continued. We will not engage in further debate about the reality of those records, I ended. I hit send, then leaned back, feeling older than I was. Megan watched me, then looked toward the room where our son slept. We just moved this out of family drama into something heavier, she murmured. She wasn't wrong, but there was no turning that dial back anymore. The next several days passed with no calls, no messages, no surprise visits. The quiet felt wrong, like the pause before a storm or a surrender. I checked my email more than usual, half expecting another blast. Instead, nothing came from them at all, which somehow felt worse. During our next pediatric appointment, the doctor asked how things were going. Megan hesitated, then briefly mentioned the visit from child services. The doctor's expression shifted from clinical to protective in a heartbeat. If anyone questions your choices again, send them my way, she said. Walking out of that clinic, I held our kid's small hand. He toddled between us, focused on his own short steps. He had no idea how many adults had used his health as a battlefield. Looking at him, I knew we'd walk through that fire again if needed. I still replay that knock on the door sometimes when the house is quiet. The badge, the folder, the way Megan's knees almost gave out. I remember how fast things could have gone another direction. How close we came to losing control of our own story. I spotted her steering my kid toward their car before I heard Megan swear. Linda's fingers clamped around his small wrist while she talked brightly. He walked beside her, curious and relaxed, no idea why my chest spiked. The rule about staying in sight shattered in 3 seconds FL. And I cut across the grass fast enough that my breath went ragged. Stop right there, my voice cracked across the space harder than I meant. Linda froze mid-step, one foot already angled toward the parking lot. She turned slowly, guilty and offended at the same time. We're just getting some ointment I left in the trunk, her smile was thin. He's scratching that patch on his neck, I don't want it infected. My kid looked up at me, then at her, confused. He had no idea this was exactly the scenario we planned for. You don't take him to the car, ever, I reached for his hand. He shifted over without protest, still watching both of us. I told you, no separate walks, no supplies from outside. Every word tasted like metal, but I didn't back down. Megan reached us a second later, cheeks flushed from running. What part of no bags, no extras sounded unclear, she asked. Her voice trembled, but the anger carried through it. Linda's mouth tightened like she was swallowing something bitter. He's uncomfortable, I have something that eases itching naturally, she patted her pocket. Tom approached behind her, gate-heavy, eyes already narrowed. You two hover so much it's suffocating, he muttered under his breath. That line landed exactly how he meant it to. If he needs treatment, we use what his pediatrician recommended, I said. He doesn't get mystery creams out of trunks or hidden pockets. I glanced at Tom's jacket, half expecting another surprise bottle. After everything, I didn't trust any unseen container near my kid. Linda shifted her weight, trying another angle. It's just a topical blend, nothing internal, nothing strong. She pulled a small tin halfway out of her pocket so we'd see. Megan flinched like it was a loaded weapon. Put that away, Megan snapped, stepping in front of our son. He moved behind her leg automatically and clung there. You signed that you wouldn't bring products without approval in advance. Her hand shook, but she didn't retreat an inch. Tom planted himself beside Linda, crossing his arms in that old stance. This is why we wanted neutral ground instead of your booby-trapped house, he said. No cameras, no files, just family time at a park. The problem for him was, the lack of cameras bothered me for different reasons. Neutral doesn't mean lawless, I kept my eyes on the tin. You trying to sneak him to the car proves why we installed surveillance. My son peered around Megan's leg, sensing the tension without understanding it. His fingers dug into her jeans, little knuckles whitening. Linda's gaze dropped to him, then back to me. I know what helps children, I've watched generations, she insisted. Her tone softened, but the certainty stayed rigid. That little patch could clear in hours with the right application. Or react, or mask signs of something that needs real attention. Megan's voice cut through, sharp and steady now. We're not experimenting on him in parking lots because you can't handle limits. She put a hand on his shoulder, gently guiding him closer. You are so afraid of everything, Linda's eyes filled, glistening. You trust labels and clinics more than your own mother's wisdom. That used to slice Megan open, now it almost bounced off. Looking at her, I saw the difference clearly. I'm afraid of losing my child, Megan answered, tone even. Not of germs, not of headlines, of arrogant decisions around his care. She gestured toward the car, then toward the tin. Every time you hide a dose, you prove you care more about being right. Tom snorted an ugly sound. You think you're better parents because you bow to prescriptions, he scoffed. You're raising him to run to pills for every small discomfort. He spat the word pills like it was filth. I stepped a bit closer, lowering my voice. You reported us to services for the same thing, I reminded him. They investigated, they cleared us, they warned us about you. His eyes flickered at that last part, the only crack I saw. You dragged outsiders into family business, he shot back. That's unforgivable where I come from. Where we are now, letting you keep doing this would be worse, I replied. I pictured the folder at home, stuffed with everything they dismissed. Other kids played on the nearby equipment, parents chatting in clusters. Nobody paid attention to the quiet drama happening beside the path. It felt bizarre that a few feet away, people laughed freely. Our little group stood locked in a standoff over a small metal tin. Give it here, Megan held out her palm, fingers steady. If it's so harmless, you won't mind leaving it with us. Linda's lips parted, then pressed shut again. She clasped the tin tighter instead of releasing it. That's what I thought, Megan said, dropping her hand. If you won't let it out of your grip, it doesn't belong near him. There was no yelling, just cold finality. That tone scared me more than any SCR. Eaming match we'd had earlier. You're tearing this family apart over a rash, Linda's voice broke. She turned to our son, arms outstretched. Come to Nana, sweetheart, let me see your neck, she coaxed. He stayed where he was, eyes dipping to the shiny object she hid. He looked up at Megan instead. Mom, can we go to the swings now? He asked. His voice sounded small but clear, cutting through every adult word. In that instant, his choice of anchor answered louder than any argument. Megan nodded and brushed his hair back gently. In a minute, she promised, still facing her parents. First, we're finishing something important. His shoulders slumped with a child's impatience, then he clung to my leg instead. I crouched so I was level with him. Buddy, right now the grown-ups are talking about safety, I told him. He frowned, not loving that answer, but he listened. Can you stay by me until we're done? I asked, and he nodded. I straightened and looked at Linda and Tom one more time. This was a trial run, I said, referring to the outdoor meetup. You just failed it in under half an hour. The words came easier than I expected. Tom exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. So that's it, one misunderstanding and we're banished, he challenged. This wasn't confusion, I replied. This was you pushing at the edge the first chance you got. Linda shook her head, tears spilling now. I can't be your enemy, she whispered. You're making me into the villain because you're terrified. Her voice shook, but the self-pity in it landed hard. Megan's shoulders slumped for a brief second, then squared again. You do that yourself when you ignore our boundaries, she answered. I wanted this to work, I really did. The grief there was real, sitting right beside the anger. Tom glanced at the playground, then back at us. You'll regret this when he's older and asking where we are, he warned. You'll have to explain why you cut off loving grandparents. The threat sat there dressed as prophecy. I'll tell him we protected him, I responded quietly. That we stopped anyone who kept risking his health. I met Tom's gaze until he looked away first. It was the smallest victory, but it mattered. Linda tried one last angle. Can we at least walk him to the car together when you leave, she pleaded. Just to say goodbye properly, no tricks, I promise. The word promise meant almost nothing from her by then. No, Megan answered before I could speak. This goodbye happens right here, where everything is visible. She stepped closer to her mother, close enough to smell that familiar perfume. I can't keep pretending you might change, she added almost to herself. Linda flinched like she'd been slapped. I change every day for prayer and faith, that should count, she insisted. It doesn't count if it never reaches your actions, Megan replied. If your conviction keeps overriding our parenting, it's not faith, it's control. Tom adjusted his stance, like he was preparing for another round. Are you actually saying you're done with us? He asked. He kept his tone low, but I heard the steel inside it. Megan took a breath, then answered in a voice that didn't waver. Yes, she said. Unless you can respect every medical decision we make and stay out of it. Her eyes flicked to the tin still clenched in Linda's hand. Today showed me you can't, she finished, and the last thread snapped. The silence that followed felt colder than anything before. Kids shouted in the distance, a dog barked, someone called for snacks. Our little circle stood frozen in a separate weather system. I could almost see the divide forming under our feet. Linda drew herself up, wiping her cheeks with quick, angry motions. Then we'll leave you to your doctors and your fear, she said. You'll remember us when that world fails you, she added. She spun toward the parking lot, Tom falling into step beside her. Our son watched them go, brow furrowed. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad? He asked softly. They're sad, Megan answered, kneeling to meet his eyes. And we're sad too, but we're also keeping you safe. He seemed to accept that on a kid level. Can we do the swings now? He asked again. Yeah, I replied, forcing a smile that almost felt real. Swings sound perfect right now. Later that night, after he finally fell asleep, the weight hit. I sat at the table with my phone, drafting one more message. No yelling, no accusations, just clear terms and final lines. My fingers hovered before I started typing. In light of today's events, we're ending all visits for now, I wrote. We cannot keep giving chances while you ignore agreed limits, I continued. Any contact going forward will go through email only, I finished. I reread it twice, then handed the phone to Megan to check. She scanned the text slowly, then nodded. Add one more line, she whispered. We're open to reconsidering if you can affirm. In writing that you will stay out of his medical care completely. Her eyes met mine, even if they never send that, I want it there. I added the sentence, then hit send before I could second guess it. We watched the screen together, waiting for the usual rapid response. Nothing came back. The absence of dots said more than any furious paragraph. Weeks stretched. Birthdays passed, holidays rolled up, invitations from extended relatives appeared. Are you coming if your parents are there? Cousins asked delicately. We answered no more often than we wanted, for one small reason. Our son grew, learned new words, collected small bumps and sniffles. Every time something minor happened, I watched our choices. Urgent care when needed, rest when appropriate, advice from professionals. No secret mixtures, no parking lot interventions, no whispered adjustments. Every few months he'd ask about the people in older photos. Who's that holding me? He'd ask, finger on Linda's face. That's family we don't see right now, Megan would answer calmly. They broke some safety rules, and we're waiting to see if they can fix it. Will they? He asked, once older, eyes sharper. I don't know, I told him honestly. What I do know is we won't gamble with your health to find out. That answer seemed to matter more to him than the rest. Sometimes, after he's asleep and the house is quiet, I still test myself. I imagine the phone ringing with their number after years of silence. I picture them saying the right words, promising to leave decisions alone. Then I zoom in on a pair of hands tipping liquid into a sink. That's the thing I can't unknow now. Once you've watched trust drain away in a clear stream, it never looks the same. I don't wait for more proof, I don't minimize warning signs anymore. I learned that day in the park that protecting my kid means protecting my own judgment first.